One of the easiest traps for a firm is mistaking a satisfied client for a secure one.
Yes, because those are not always the same thing. A client can look settled, stay for years, and say good things about the experience, and the relationship can still be more fragile than it seems.
That's what makes advisor change such a revealing moment. It tests something firms often assume is already solid.
Exactly, because comfort is not the same as commitment, and satisfaction is not the same as loyalty.
This is Advising Humans, where we talk about the human side of advice and what's often happening underneath the visible conversation.
And in this mini episode, we're looking at one of the most important distinctions in advisor change. A client can be satisfied with the firm and still be emotionally loyal to the advisor.
And that difference can stay hidden for a long time.
Right, an advisor change is often the moment that exposes it.
I think that's such a useful line because firms can feel very reassured by the signals they usually look at.
Right, long tenure, positive feedback, stable retention, good service scores, a client who seems comfortable and engaged.
And on the surface, all of that can look like proof that the relationship is strong.
Exactly, but advisor change has a way of testing that assumption. Because the moment the advisor changes, the client has to answer a question they may not have been asking before. What exactly am I loyal to here?
The firm or the person?
Right, and sometimes the answer is much more personal than leadership expects.
I think that's the uncomfortable part. A client can genuinely like the firm. They may appreciate the service, trust the platform, feel good about performance, and still feel most attached to the advisor who made the whole relationship feel understandable and safe.
Yes, that's what makes this so easy to misread. The client may be satisfied with many parts of the experience, but the emotional center of the relationship may still live with one person.
So everything feels stable while that person is still there.
Exactly, which means the firm can start to think the relationship belongs more to the firm than it really does.
And then advisor change happens.
And that's when the difference gets exposed. Not because the client suddenly becomes irrational or disloyal, but because the person anchoring the relationship has changed.
That's such an important word.
Because that's often what the advisor has been. The anchor, the familiar person, the trusted interpreter, the one who knows how to guide the client through complexity in a way that feels steady.
So when that anchor moves, the client may start reassessing things that used to feel settled.
Yes, and that's where uncertainty becomes so important. A satisfied client may have had no strong reason to revisit the relationship before, but once the advisor changes, the client has to think again. Do I trust this new person? Do I still feel known here? Is this going to feel the same?
So the change itself becomes the catalyst.
Exactly. It gets the client rethinking something they had not been actively questioning before. And that's why firms can be surprised by what happens next. They thought the relationship was solid because nothing had disrupted it yet.
That's such an important point. Just because the relationship looked stable before the transition does not mean it was strong enough to hold through it.
Right. Sometimes it only proves that the client had no reason to reconsider the relationship while the advisor they trusted was still in place.
Which means advisor change becomes the moment you really find out what was holding the relationship together.
It does. It shows whether the client's sense of safety was tied more to the firm or more to the advisor.
And I think that can be hard for firms to face because they naturally want to believe their client relationships are more durable than that.
It's much more comfortable to believe the relationship belongs to the firm. But in practice, a lot of trust in wealth management is built in very human ways, through repeated conversations, through memory, through tone, through a person who knows how to make the client feel less overwhelmed.
Which means the advisor can quietly become the relationship, even if the firm doesn't fully realize it.
Exactly. And then when that advisor leaves, retires, or gets replaced, the firm is suddenly confronted with something it may have underestimated all along. The client wasn't only staying because the service felt solid. The client was staying because this particular person made the relationship feel dependable.
And that doesn't always mean the client leaves immediately.
No, that's important. This is not about every satisfied client suddenly leaving the second an advisor changes. The point is that advisor change can show that the relationship was not as strong as it seemed.
So the client may still stay for now, but the relationship feels different.
Exactly. A little less automatic, a little less rooted, a little more open to reconsideration.
Which is why satisfaction can be such a misleading signal if you don't ask what it's really attached to.
Right. Is the client really attached to the institution? Or are they satisfied because the advisor they trust is still holding the whole experience together?
That's really the question.
And it matters because firms can overestimate how transferable trust will be. They assume that because the client likes the experience now, the client will naturally stay comfortable when the relationship changes. But trust doesn't automatically move just because a firm wants it to.
It has to be rebuilt or already be shared more broadly.
Exactly. Which is why advisor change is such a revealing moment. It shows whether the relationship has truly been institutionalized or whether one advisor has been carrying most of the emotional weight.
So if we were putting this into one clear takeaway, it might be this. A satisfied client is not always a loyal client in the way a firm hopes.
I think that's right. Satisfaction can be real, but loyalty really gets tested when the person the client trusts most changes.
And that's what makes this such an important part of the larger conversation.
Yes, because once you see that, you understand why the damage is not always obvious right away. Sometimes the relationship doesn't break all at once. It just starts to weaken quietly.
Which is exactly why this matters. The damage is not always loud. Sometimes it starts quietly. If this conversation made you think differently about what client satisfaction does and doesn't tell you, share it with another advisor or leader who cares about building relationships that can actually hold through change.
And if you want a more consistent way for your team to navigate advisor change, the Advisor Change Transition Playbook Suite for Advisors gives you shared language, meeting flow, and practical tools to help create a steadier client experience before loyalty gets tested.
Because the moments that test trust are often the moments that matter most. Thanks for listening to Advising Humans.
We'll see you next time.